time to fuel your business success. Welcome to Harmonious at Lunch. We're bringing you bite-sized advice and expert conversations to drive clarity and growth 5 days a week. Make sure you join our Facebook group at humanopt.com/lunch, where listeners like you and our guests hang out so we can find harmony in business together. If you're building a business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
How do you build a business so it's aligned with who you are and isn't killing you every single day? Wow, that's dramatic. Welcome back to Harmonious at Lunch. But we're going to dive in because this is an important conversation. A lot of people build businesses with no path to exit or even thought of what's next. And we're going to answer that question of how do you build it so you can get there and make sure that that process goes smoothly. Louis Kim is our guest today. Welcome to the show and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Brandon. Really excited to talk to you today.
So you shared a very interesting stat with me before we started recording. You said between 70 and 75% of business owners have absolutely no plan for what's next. No succession plan, no exit plan. I would assume no even target or hope that would be a possibility. That's crazy. Why is that?
I think as entrepreneurs and as business people, what we do is we go out and we try and solve a problem, right? And we build something and we get into doing this thing really well, right? We go in and, people talk about the seasons of grinding and hustling and then building and scaling. And you get to a certain point, I think you're so in it in what you've done, what you've built, you're serving your customers and clients and your people. And you just get to a point where you're not thinking about long-term. And I think in general, especially in Western society, we don't really talk about aging as well. We don't talk about those sort of next chapters in our life. And I think what happens is every day that passes, time goes on and you don't think long-term planning. I mean, the boomer generation, we're going to have the single largest transfer of wealth in the United States. Something like $84 trillion of wealth is going to pass. There's 2.5 million small businesses owned by the boomer generation. And as you said, there's 75% of them don't have a plan for what's next. And that's even within family businesses of talking about how it transitions to the next generation. I think we just get to a place of just working, going, doing, and then time passes and you wake up one day and you're in the mirror and you're 60 plus years old and haven't really thought about what's next.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think a lot of people start their business because, there's a number of reasons, but a lot of times it's to solve a problem.
Yeah.
Another big one is I just don't want a boss anymore.
Yeah.
It could be because you're passionate about what you're doing and you just love it and you want to pour yourself into it. Those are all great. I'm never going to judge the reason somebody starts a business. However, once you've been doing it for a couple of months to a couple of years, you really do have to look forward and say, all right, what's next? Am I going to grow this business? Is it going to be more of a hobby business? Like what's the path for it? And not all businesses will sell. That's the other thing to consider. Like it has to be set up the right way. So in the context of today's conversation, kind of looking at the topic is becoming an aligned leader. How do you start to build that business that's aligned with you, who you are as a leader? And then also, I assumed it's aligned with where you want to go and how you want to potentially exit that business.
Yeah. The first thing you touched on there, which is the building, right? Whether it's, you don't want to be boss anymore, or you don't want to have a boss anymore, or you want to actually solve a problem. You go into it with a simple thing, right? It's a simple solution to a thing. Even not wanting to have a boss is you're solving your own problem. And I think over time, you kind of go and you build. And you're so focused on the work that we don't spend enough time on us as people, as individuals, especially in the entrepreneurial space, because there's this romanization of how hard you work and hustle. And look, you've got to put a lot of hours in to build anything great, right? And you know that. But I think it really begins with understanding yourself, right? And for me, I had achieved success fairly early. And, the year that I sold a business, it was 2012, I'd been on like 4 vacations. I'd spent 6 or 7 weeks not working, traveling with my now wife. And I was miserable, right? I was miserable because I hadn't done that thing of going inward and understanding what is it that I want for my life? Where am I going? Where is the ultimate destination? And I think for a lot of us who go and build business, because we had built a business over 8 years, done very well. And during that process, it was just keep your head down. You go, you serve the customer. And when you're operating lean, right, and you're trying to create critical mass in your cash, you do a lot of things that are not sustainable in the long term. And sometimes I feel like it's a pattern you get into, and then you don't think about the big picture. You don't take time away, and you don't do that inward journey. Because I think that's where it comes from, is that once you start to understand that the real happiness is the growth and it's the progress, right? And that comes from within us. But when we find that clarity and that path where we're going, I think that is really the medicine that solves all of these things that we're talking about. Because once you can get super clear, and as an entrepreneur, you got to take a step back and actually take the time to do it, right? And that clarity comes from, I believe, from that inner sort of soul searching where you find and you go deep. And I inherently believe entrepreneurship is one of the most spiritual things that a person can do, because you take something that doesn't exist, or take something that is existing, and you improve it constantly, right? And you're growing and creating. It is a very creative process. And I think without direction, that's where we find ourselves in those traps, right? Of being unhappy, being burnt out, but then also getting to a certain point in our life where we're not sure what's next, because this is all we know.
Yeah, it's I had I'll say similar journey. I sold my business a couple of years ago, and right after it, I actually took the opposite approach. I dove into something else before I even sold the business, because I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, all right, well, what's going to be next? And I couldn't really answer that question. I couldn't answer the question of like, what do I want to do really? So it's kind of like two polar opposites, right? So tell me what happened in that time in 2012, right after you sold. You took a vacation, which I'm sure you didn't know what that word really was for the prior 8 years, if I had to guess. How did you start to discover where you want to go, what your purpose really was, and what was next for you?
Yeah, so I like you, I had resources, so I kept trying things, right? And I kept going, but I was coming from a place of such lack of clarity, lack of sort of centeredness in my understanding. And it was trying to use too much of just my mind, right? Just being clever about things. So we did a lot of different things, like went into different ventures. Some of them did okay, some of them failed. Went into partnerships, because then I thought partnerships were the problem. And the reoccurring thing for me, as I had to finally take ownership over what was going on, and the same element, right, that was in each one of these circumstances that didn't work out was me. And so once I looked at that, I realized, okay, I need to take a step back, and I really need to figure out what are the things that are causing me to behave a particular way, or want to, dive in, because I was operating from such a place of wanting to achieve that significance that I'd already had, as opposed to wanting to build something because it was meaningful to me, right? And Tony Robbins has a great quote that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And that really resonated with me. And that's where that whole path started, is really going inward. And once I started to develop clarity about the things that mattered to me, right? It's a lot of like what you guys do at Human Op, is that there's an alignment of who I am, but it's coming from this place that's very inward, because I had all these stories about what entrepreneurship was, right? And what making money was. And they were all of these negative things that had just culminated. And so what I had was this guilt, right? And I don't know how else to put it other than it didn't fulfill me, it didn't make me happy, because I had all these stories about what it was. And once I started to shift my own perspective and paradigm in life, it allowed me to align and be very focused and clear about where I was going.
And it's interesting too, because I mean, if you open up any social media platform,
Yeah.
you're going to see, 5 different ways of what entrepreneurship should look like. And that's big, big air quotes on should, right?
Yeah.
Depending on who you're hearing it from. It's my personal belief that they're all wrong and they're all right at the same time. Like whatever one you latch onto is going to be the one that you say is right.
Right.
And whichever ones you don't think are right are going to be the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But you have to know who you are at your core and what drives you, like you said, or else everything's just noise and it's confusing.
100%. It's, you know, it's like David Goggins, right? Who's gonna raise the boats? Like, is that your mentality towards life? And there's nothing wrong with it. It works for them, right? Or are you gonna come from the place of, someone who's more spiritual, right? Is it Sadhguru? These philosophical things and approaches to life that ultimately lead to a similar path for the person, but they're very different, right? And it's like, which one is the right one for you? And for me, it's finding that place of very clear purpose and direction where I want to go. And what came to me over time is that, look, in building these businesses and going and doing what we do, I want to be a giant example of being a heart-centered leader, right? To show that you can come from this place of heart, come from this place of understanding that, the tool of capitalism is this beautiful way of creating wealth and money and resources and innovation. But it's up to us as people to direct what this is put on. And so for me, it's wanting to improve the human experience, wanting to go and make people's lives better. And that's not just our customers or clients. That's also the people that are part of our teams, our vendors, the community, everything around us, so that we can truly, truly use this thing as a tool of connection.
I guess it's pretty obvious that I agree with you, because if you're watching, the word human is on my screen 3 times. It's on my shirt, it's on my screen, and it's on my wall behind me over there. That's the secret sauce is the human part of business, but also life. It's not, it's not all business all the time. But being that heart-centered leader that also carries into your personal life with your family, your kids, your relationships. It's so important to be fully aligned with who you are and understand that in all aspects of life. Now, this conversation is business, of course, but don't overlook the power of that alignment and that heart-centeredness. So, Louis, tell me this: you've built a business, I would say relatively unique business now, where you actually buy and build other businesses.
Yeah.
How do you take this approach of being human-centered into building your own business first, but then seeking out, acquiring, and then building the businesses you invest in?
Yeah, so I've spent my entire career buying and building small businesses. And not too long after my burnout, I went and realized, look, I can do this at a little bit larger scale. And so we formalized and created a private equity firm. And what we do is we create what I call value-based operations, right? And so everything that we do, every operation, every business we go into, the first thing we do, and these are the kind of things that, especially for older businesses who have staff that have been around 10, 15, 20 years, it can be a bit of a challenge sometimes because they don't want to change. Like, we as humans in general don't really like change, right? Like, it's why we get to that place of any sort of growth. It feels very difficult, right? Because of the way our brains work. But when you come in and you try and change a culture and how people do things, it can be tough. And so we come in and we create a set of values with the people that are part of it that become the core of the operation of what we do. And those values, we want to make sure those values are something that everyone that's part of the team are aligned with. And when they're aligned to it, then we know we're going in the same direction and we're speaking the same language. Right. And then we get behind the mission of whatever that business is going to be and whatever we create. But really what that allows us to do is that we put the right people on the bus. We create values and alignment people to those values. So we're speaking the same language, but then it allows us to create these processes that are super simple. Right. And it might just be a framework of, here's the 5 steps to, buying this book. And it's a random example there, but like, to buying this book. But we don't have to tell this person, here's the, 1A, 2C, X, all the way down the line, because if they understand the values and they're aligned to it, and so here's the outcome, here are the general steps of where we're going, as long as we're getting there and we're doing it and we're serving the customer in the way that we've all agreed we would, it's not an issue. And what we find is that the people that are parts of our teams, they're so much more fulfilled because they don't feel like they're robots. They feel like they're contributing. And the beauty of it is that autonomy creates an opportunity. And this is another thing that we do, is we try and keep things very flat, right? None of our businesses are, billion-dollar businesses. So we don't need, and I think most businesses don't really need this, but we don't have to have 15 layers of management, right? We try and keep the front line as close to the top as we can, right? And so those people feel empowered also to contribute and to give their ideas back. You know, as a kid, I was fortunate to be around small business with my parents, and it would always boggle my mind. I would talk to just someone who's in the corporate world, how someone in the upper levels of management, you know, in the 80s wouldn't want to hear what the guy in the front line knows, right? The guy sticking that rivet in, you know, 300, 500,000 times a day knows so much more about what's going on in the line than that person at the mid tier. And this is given an avenue where people feel, because they're contributing and they're part of the bigger picture, they're aligned to this bigger piece that allows us to have them contribute in other ways beyond just their work, right? Ideas. And it's a beautiful vehicle to watch people grow into the company, right? Where they start to really take ownership. And that's one of the things that is the most rewarding for me, is to have all these people who are truly aligned, who are part of this process, who begin to take ownership over what's happening. And that makes life so much easier. And, you know, I mean, you know, as business owners, if we were to think about, you know, every time something's going wrong within our business, we'd probably have a heart attack, right? Because if we wanted to micromanage, everything is going wrong, right? But if we can give these people these clear framework and the right people on the bus, it's very liberating.
Yeah, if you're a listener of this show, you already know that I agree with everything Louis just said. That's the process that we take. I actually stumbled on that process in my first business. I didn't realize that if you just gave people autonomy, you got them all to agree collectively why we're here and the mission we're serving, and we point everything towards that mission, business becomes really easy. Like, I don't want to oversimplify it and say like anybody could run a business. No, that's not really it. But if you get those couple of things right, I mean, your business can go really far, really fast. And I did, you know, something very similar where even just the SOPs that you mentioned, we always had the last checkbox was, it does the process I just went through serve the customer at the highest level. That was sort of our North Star. We wanted to have a really, really customer experience centric organization.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to answer questions. Like, people they would see that and they would be able to answer all their questions. They'd be able to deliver on the product or the service. They would deliver great customer service, and our business grew itself. I never spent a dime on marketing. And it was like, oh, this is pretty simple.
That is so brilliant. I'm going to steal it. Just want you to know that. Like,
it's yours. It's your gift. My gift to you for coming on the show.
It's such a simple thing though, right? But it's a last look back, right? In whatever that process or whatever the flow is just to say, hey, did I fulfill this? And if you have the right people and the values that are there, they're going to answer it in the way that the intention is set, you know? And I think what it sounds like is you were very aware early on that business in the world is about the human, right? It's the people. And how do you keep those people aligned to this goal? I mean, that's what leadership's about, is moving people towards something. And you can choose to be, excuse me, you can have other ways of doing it. You can choose to be aggressive, or you can choose to create values and have people aligned and move towards it. You know, it's the difference between the push and the pull.
Yeah, the quote, people don't always remember what you say, but they always remember how you made them feel. That's been with me for a number of years now, and it really does shape every decision that I make, especially in the business context. And I always train that to the people that I'm leading. And it's one of those things, like, you know, I'll fight this to the grave, right? Like, people are going to go with the experience and the better feeling over the price tag every single time. It may not be right off the bat, but it will always migrate to how you make somebody feel in business. And if you can just get those couple of things right, just sit back and watch your business grow. It's really that simple.
Yeah, you're so spot on, because it's even internally with your people, externally with your clients and customers. You know, I think the stat in like a few years ago was about 75, but today with inflation is probably closer to 100. When people reach a certain economic threshold, what's important to them, you know, is once their baseline is taken care of, is how they feel about the work they do, right? Do they feel like they're contributing? Do they feel like they're part of something greater? And I think it's the same for our clients, right? Or our customers. It's the market is what it is. There's certain things that are commoditized, but even those things, if you make people feel really good about what they're buying and their experience, it's no longer a commodity.
Yeah, absolutely. Louis, I love this conversation so much. I wish we could keep having it.
Yeah.
We got to wrap this episode up. I love what you're doing because you're doing it the right way. You're not doing it to take over the world and make $1 bajillion. And if that's what happens, fantastic. I stand by that all day long. But you're doing it for the right reasons for the people. So tell me, if someone's maybe looking to sell their business, exit their business, or invest with you, where is the best place to connect and learn more about that opportunity?
The best place is just to come to my personal site, which is just loukim.com. It's LOUKIM.com. And that there's a contact form there. That's where my blog is. And there's a redirect to the things that I'm involved in.
I love it. Wherever you're watching or listening, that's on the screen. It's in the show notes. Louis, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you subscribe, and please go check that out again in the show notes down below. Go click around, connect with Louis, and we'll see you back tomorrow for another episode of Harmonious at Lunch.
Another episode of Harmonious at Lunch in the books. I hope this episode made you think and you grabbed some actionable ideas to propel your business. Don't forget to like, comment your takeaways, and subscribe wherever you're listening so we can help more entrepreneurs just like you achieve harmony in their life and business. For cutting-edge tools that bring clarity to your people and processes, check out humanoff.com to download our app today. See you next time.